Check one. My glasses are always weird. Say da-da-da, what do I do with my hands? This is not the normal kind of video that I make, but I have a couple of beats that are in the works for videos that are happening next week, and I just want a little more time with them, so I figured I might as well just make a video that I want to make. And today I'm going to recommend 10 books that I think every indie artist or musician should read. I absolutely love books. I am obsessed with them, and I want to make you obsessed with them too, because it's genuinely one of the best value adds that you can add to your life. The reason why I think that books are so awesome is because they're a really easy way to get a lot of high quality information quickly without having to do the necessary research. Like if you wanted to get business advice from Steve Jobs, A, you physically can't anymore because he's dead, but B, if he was alive and you wanted to get that, it would cost millions of dollars to get an appointment with him, if he even allowed such a thing. But his memoir is available on Amazon for $20. So there's really no reason for you to not go for it. But yeah, I'll just link the books in the description below. They're not affiliate links, so I'm not getting a kickback off of them. I just genuinely believe that if you are an indie musician or an indie artist, these books will help you live a better life because they have helped me so much. So I have about 10-ish books that I'm going to walk through today. So the first section is books for people who are interested in learning about the music industry. The second category is books for people who are artists or creatives and want to develop their craft a little bit more. And the third are just kind of general self-development books, which I really hate that term, but they're books that just anybody can benefit from. And so I think they're worth mentioning here. For every book, I'm just going to talk about the author real quick, talk about the contents of the book, and why I think it's useful for indie musicians and artists. So without further ado, let's just go into it. So the first book is going to be Rockonomics by Alan B. Kruger. So Alan actually used to be the former United States Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy. And this book is actually his dissection of the music industry from an economic standpoint. And it started when he gave a presentation of the economic state of the music industry to Barack Obama. So this is a very comprehensive look at the music industry from an economic standpoint. I will say it is kind of a slog to get through. It is very analytical. But if you are somebody who just knows nothing about the music industry, if you're very green and you just want to understand things like, okay, how have things changed in the past 10 years? I have all these musician friends from the 80s and they're giving me advice and it's not good advice. Why is that? Or you just want to get a general starting point of, okay, I am starting in the music industry. I want to understand it fully. I would start with this book. Again, it's written by somebody who has more of an analyst's mindset, so it can be kind of hard to get through sometimes. It's in the money and finance section, but I still think it has a lot of value for people. The second book I would recommend is Get More Fans, the DIY Guide to the New Music Business, written by Jesse Cannon and Todd Thomas. I'm sorry, Todd. I should mention you more often. Jesse has been in the music industry for a long time. He started out as a mixing, mastering engineer, producer, and you can just look at some of the names he's worked with: The Cure, Weird Al Yankovic, The Misfits, Limp Bizkit, Dillinger Escape Plan, Transit, Morning Glory. He has multiple music podcasts that have made it into the top 5 music podcasts on Apple. One of them is actually hosted by Atlantic Records, and he actually used to be a manager for some bands that used to be on Rise Records. So the dude knows his stuff. If the last book was more of an oversight view of the music industry as a whole, I would say this book is more of an operations manual. A lot of its information is very practical. Honestly, I recommend indie artists buy this, and whenever you have like a question about something, just look and see if it's in the table of contents, because normally Jesse has like pretty in-depth descriptions about how stuff works and how to do it. So yeah, everything from how to choose a record producer to booking shows to selling more merch, what the role of CDs are in the modern music industry, to the basics of Facebook ads, choosing a manager and getting your music heard more on the internet. Also, this dude updates the book constantly, so pretty much everything in this book is pretty darn up to date. Right now I have the 2021 edition. This is a great place to start. Now we're going to look at more of the creative, artistic development books. And the first one I always start with is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. So Steven Pressfield has been around for a long time. A lot of his works are in the more historical fiction genre. He also wrote a lot of screenplays in the 80s and 90s. But after writing a bunch of novels, he created this nonfiction book called The War of Art. And this is the first of like a trilogy of books, but he goes really deep into the specifics of his creative process and gives very practical tips on how to overcome things like resistance. Since Steven Pressfield is more of a fiction writer, he's able to personify resistance as like this evil creature that doesn't want you to finish your piece of art. And it's actually a very enjoyable read. Also, super short. If you buy the physical book, it's like that thick, and sometimes chapters can be a couple of pages, so it's a very easy read. But yeah, this is one of the first sort of artistic artistic development books that I give to people. It's a very blue-collar look at how to create art. And if you're somebody who suffers from not being inspired a lot or feeling like you just can't create anything right now, I would highly recommend this book. The next book I would recommend is the Steal Like an Artist trilogy, which is Steal Like an Artist, Show Your Work and Keep Going. If you're going to get one of them, though, I would recommend Steal Like an Artist. So Austin has a very interesting world that he lives in. He calls himself a writer who draws. If you are somebody who likes physical books, I would actually highly recommend getting the physical versions of these because they're very illustrated. But Austin has become sort of notable for his approach of talking about creativity. He's done keynote stuff for Pixar, Google, South by Southwest, TEDx, and The Economist. I'm just going to talk about the first book, Steal Like an Artist. And the main reason why I think a lot of people should check out Steal Like an Artist is because it's one of those books that really takes a realistic, objective approach to the process of creativity and the process of actually making something. If a lot of the times you create something and you feel like, oh, this is just derivative of somebody else, this book can actually help you accept the fact that that is kind of a part of the normal creative process. And it's a great way to sort of shift your perspective, especially if you're somebody who creates art for a living. So yeah, I love this book as well. The only author on here who is double dipping, we have Processing Creativity, also by Jesse Cannon. I'm sure he's sick of me tagging him and stuff, but you know, if you don't want me tagging you in a lot of stuff, Jesse, you need to stop writing good books. But yeah, while Get More Fans is more of an operations manual for running more of the business side of being an artist, in this book, Jesse really describes his findings, both from his personal experiences as a producer, but also clinical studies, and cites a lot of sources, about the process of a band coming into a studio and making an album. He talks a lot about the common hurdles that bands will struggle with in the studio, how to operate as a collaborator, how to navigate the politics of having a creative desire while also spending a lot of money, and if you're signed to a label, also having to answer to a lot of suits. So yeah, very interesting book from a very well-researched guy. If you are a musician and you have never gone into a studio before, or if you have gone into a studio before, I recommend you read this book. If there's any one book on this list that I would recommend people read, it's this one. We then have Daily Rituals by Mason Curry. So Mason actually created something really cool with this book. He took the day-to-day working lives of more than 300 creative minds and just put them in a book. Everything's properly cited and sourced, but essentially it walks through the daily habits and rituals of very notable people from history, from politicians to classical composers, novelists, ballerinas, philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians. And it just looks at like how weird a lot of these people are. And I highly recommend that you look at this book if you are trying to develop some sort of daily routine for yourself, because the reality is artistic people tend to be kind of weird, which is why we're awesome. But this book can really help cement the fact that your daily routine does not need to be the pinnacle of productivity. Many of the great minds throughout history have been very unproductive in their daily routines, and it's more about the process of finding what works for you. Almost doing a scientific process of let's try this and let's try this. Oh, that didn't work. Let's get rid of this. Oh, this worked. Let's keep that. I will say straight up front, don't do everything that the people in this book do. Some of the people in this book are people like Ernest Hemingway. So not every daily habit in here is going to be the healthiest, but yeah, still a great book. Next book I recommend is On Writing, a Memoir of Craft by Stephen King. Everybody knows who Stephen King is. He is a legendary author. He's responsible for writing books like It, The Shining, and just a billion others. Like seriously, the dude is 74 years old and he has 60 novels out. And while part of this book is a memoir of his early life before he was published, there's a very large section in the middle of this book called On Writing. And it has a lot of really practical advice for creatives who are working on a daily routine. Things like maybe you shouldn't have a super comfortable setup. Maybe you need a very less than comfortable setup in the corner of the room to make you create more. There's also some really cool stuff in here about the usefulness of rough drafts and the revision process and the benefits of writing something every single day. This book will also help you as a lyricist because a lot of the storytelling tools that Stephen King talks about in this book one-to-one translate to telling stories in the context of a song. This book is amazing and I love it, and I've gone through that middle section about 5 times now. Similar to that, I recommend this book, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Anne Lamott is a creative writing instructor, but she is also a very accomplished novelist. And similar to the Stephen King book that we just looked at, she has a lot of really awesome practical advice for storytelling. And a lot of that advice translates one-to-one to writing really colorful lyrics. There's also some very unique insights in this book that come from somebody who is in the novel world, because as much as musicians like to complain about how Spotify makes everything a lot harder, the truth is nothing is harder than being a novelist, because you have a project that is very, very labor intensive for a long period of time. So there's some very useful tips on productivity and how to separate yourself from your emotions, and sometimes just living in your emotions. Okay, we've gotten through those. Now we're going to look at the last three, and these are going to be the three sort of self-help books that I would recommend. The first is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book is a classic. So the original publication for this book was in 1936, and they just keep updating it and resubmitting it. This is less of a Dale Carnegie book, and more so it was a collective experiment that was basically done to make up for the fact that a lot of us as human beings are taught for years and years how to write. We are taught how to express ideas, but very few of us are taught how to actually listen to people. Not a lot of us are instructed about social skills. So this book was basically created to fill that void. It has a very misleading title that makes it sound like it's how to get people to do whatever you want, but really it's just a way for you to increase the value of the relationships you have in your life, how to be kinder to people, how to listen to them. And as a side effect, this will probably help you in your music career, because if you are somebody who is constantly listening to people and are trying to be empathetic and think of things from their perspective, people are probably more willing to work with you, just being honest. And then similar to that book, we have The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, which is very similar. It sounds like this macho, like how to be productive book, but really it's teaching you how to be an empathetic listener, how to objectively look at your own actions and seeing if you could be reinforcing unhealthy behavior in other people, how to convey love and understanding to people in a way that they are more likely to understand that that's what you're doing. This and the last book together have probably helped me develop my personal relationships more than anything else. Also, if you're doing some writing exercises where you are writing from somebody else's point of view, or maybe you're in a writing session with somebody else, it could be very useful for you to practice putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So even if you want to be sort of like pessimistic about it, there are still benefits to using this on an objective level. And then the last book we're going to look at is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm actually rereading through this one right now because I almost forgot how good it is. But if I were to break this book down, it is essentially a very, very practical psychology book that is centered around showing you how to form the good habits that you want to form and stopping the bad habits that you don't want to do anymore. As an indie artist, you are going to have to do things that you just straight up do not want to do on a regular basis, like answering emails or interacting with people online. So I would highly recommend looking at this book because it's a really great way to show you how to set barriers in place and help you set yourself up for success by honestly not requiring a lot of self-control. A lot of this book is essentially, when you are in a good state of mind, set up things so that it's just easy to do the right thing later on when you get to it. Like, I don't have to tell myself, don't spend a lot of time on your phone browsing through social media, because I have this iPad that has all my social media stuff on it, and there's a timed padlock. So I actually can't look at Instagram or TikTok for another 16 hours. And it takes very little self-control to do this. It's just set up the lock and then boop. So yeah, highly recommend this book. That was a lot of fun. I never get to talk about my love of books. This is really good. If you guys have any books that you would recommend to people, I would put them down in the comments. At the very least, I will read them. But yeah, this was a one-off video. I will be back to my normal production style videos next week. See you guys next Thursday.